And we are live. Welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. So I'm joined by Charles and Steve. Hello.
Hi, Martin. Hi, Charles.
How you doing, Steve? How you doing, Martin? Glad to be here.
Good.
I am excited for this one.
Well, we've done the whole trail now. We've done Document AI. So you'll find that on the Totally Unscripted website. So we've also done DocuSign. And now we're into documentation.
Wow.
But the documentation, it makes things move smoothly. It helps us all understand what we're trying to do.
I think
do things better.
I think it's the most unsung part of a development platform. I mean, if you're going to be a successful developer, you need documentation. Even if you are a successful developer, you still rely on documentation. What's new, what's changed, whatever. So I think, this team that we're about to be joined with are unsung heroes that make all of us successful and make all of us look good and give us great ideas on how to get things done. So I'm excited to hear how they do this. And so why don't we bring them on and let's hear all about it.
So here we go.
Hello. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
Yes, welcome.
Charles, you're too kind with that intro.
Oh, no. It's all true. It's all true. You guys are essential to make the development world go around for Workspace. And so before we dig in, Nathan and Kara, how about we get some intros personally and tell us about your team?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nathan.
Thanks. Thank you for having us on. It's great to be here with you. So my name is Nathan Gammie. I've been at Google for just over 10 years now. And actually, I started my Google journey not with tech writing, actually was doing support rep kind of work for what is now Google Ad Manager. And that was kind of where I developed a love for tech writing. I'd studied ancient languages kind of back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So I always kind of had it in me. But I really just found a lot of satisfaction and joy out of, taking something that feels very complicated and explaining it and seeing that light bulb kind of go on for someone where they say, oh, well, it's a lot simpler than I thought. And they kind of feel that transformation. And so that's kind of what led me into tech writing now. And so now I, manage a small but mighty team of writers, Kara being one that covers, Google Workspace external developer documentation on developers.google.com.
Awesome.
Sweet. I'm Kara, Ireland. I am a technical writer on Nathan's team. I actually started my career in sales and marketing. So it was an interesting journey to realize that I had a passion for content. I ended up going into content marketing, and the thing that I really liked about content marketing was being able to provide value to people without just selling them something. And so when the opportunity at Google came up, it was for writing support content for end users. And I thought, wow, I could just add value all the time. There's no selling needed. And so that sounded right up my alley. So I ended up joining Google 3 years ago as an end user help center writer. I was actually working on Google Workspace apps originally, like Sheets and Tasks and Calendar. And then the opportunity for AppScript came up. It was funny, I took an internal class about AppScript, fell in love with it. And then when the opportunity to write about it and for me to learn more about it as I was doing that came up, I jumped on it and reached out to Nathan with probably more excitement than he was expecting. And the rest is history. Here I am today.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a great backdrop. So I have a first question. What is the glamorous life of a tech writer like? What is the day-to-day? Like, what are the things we don't think about how that great stuff gets produced?
Glamorous, I don't know. A lot of it for me is like just aching over word choice. I don't know. I mean, for a writer, it can mean a lot of things. Here at Google, it's a lot of launch support. So just making sure that as a new feature comes out, the right documentation is there for people to be able to use it immediately. And then there's also the content projects in general, where you're constantly trying to improve, look for gaps, look for opportunities to just really make the docs better and better.
Is there, you mentioned you had a sales background, Cara. Is it quite a different writing style of writing to sell something?
Totally.
Because,
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's funny with sales and marketing, there's a lot of spin involved, and you're puffing up features that, you're almost talking to the future of like, oh, okay, yes, this thing is coming out and it's going to be great. When you're writing for, technical documentation, you're just telling it like it is. So you have to be more specific about the how versus the what and the why.
Absolutely. Hey, so step back for a second. Nathan, you mentioned a small and mighty team. And we know Workspace as a product is huge. We know even as a developer surface, it's huge. How do you orchestrate a small and mighty team to produce all the great content you do? What's kind of the process there of keeping prioritization, the team flowing, the focus? Like, what's your day-to-day, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, the glamour that I feel the most is just finding new artisanal coffees. And so that is something I think that draws all tech writers together. It's a lot of coffee, and that is a huge part of how we can cover something so big with such a small number of people. But we have 5 people on our team, and so we have to scale. I don't know if I've ever met a tech writing team that feels like they have enough people to really commit and kind of fully fulfill the art of documentation in a way that they all feel like they would like. And in Google, the culture here is a lot about scaling. It's something that's just kind of at the root of the company. And so it's a great place to be a tech writer in that sense, that we have a lot of people around us who are eager to help us, do more with one person and automate things. And so, we have to be pretty stark about prioritizing. Google Workspace itself is really a compendium from a developer perspective of 40 plus developer products. And our documentation set, just to give a sense of scale, is over like 5,000 pages. And so even with an army of tech writers, you really wouldn't be able to necessarily have people feeling like they could spend a ton of time on each page. So we have to make ourselves efficient. And some of the ways we do that is through automation. Like all of our reference documentation, which is some of the backbone of our documentation, is generated from the source code, and the different comments that engineers will write as they're creating an API or creating a developer product. And then we as tech writers can come in and edit that text. And that not only allows us to scale our efforts, but it also keeps the documentation up to date, and make sure that it's actually reflecting, as Kara said, the reality and not the the puffed up wish list of what we wish the products could do. Which is
one of the things that amazes me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but most tech writers I've met or work with either are in love with their product when they start or fall in love with their product. And Kara, you mentioned you're doing that. I love to give a shout out to Ryan Rosenroth, who was one of the first tech writers on Workspace I worked with.
Yeah.
And Ryan knew the products intimately and loved them. I mean, he knew where they weren't good as well too, but he loved them and defended them and helped make the products better too. And it was so great at storytelling around it. Is it true? Do you have to love the products blindly to be a great tech writer?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I can only speak to my experience. I don't want to make a blanket statement for all tech writers, but for me, yeah, I mean, having a passion for a product has really helped me, go the extra mile in my own writing and planning for the documentation. I have been on a product that I liked, it was fine, but I wasn't as passionate about it like when I was on Sheets or now AppScript. It's just like those products that just like pull your heartstrings, you want to make better and you want to advocate for. And like you were saying, how Ryan did, I also try to do, I mean, not nearly as well. Ryan is on a pedestal in my mind, but I think the passion definitely brings forward better documentation, and then in the end, better products.
Here's a question for you, Kara. So given Nathan mentioned 40 products there, which ones are your favorites for technical writing?
Ooh. You don't ask somebody to pick their favorite child.
Yeah, right? Wait, let me get a pen and paper here. I've always been team AppScript all the way. I think one of the reasons I love it so much is because it's pretty inclusive of almost every workspace product, if not every workspace product. That way I don't have to choose.
Does that create challenges? Just the fact that it integrates with so many Google products, it just becomes quite a beast, I'd imagine, in terms of keeping together.
Yes. In short, yes. The challenges are pretty crazy because on the one hand, with AppScript itself, because it's a development platform, you can do so many things. And so as a new user to AppScript, it can be very daunting of like, okay, what do I do? So on the documentation side, what we're trying to do to alleviate some of that is be more prescriptive about defining project types and guiding people down a path of here's something you can create. And then as they learn more about the platform, they can discover the more niche things that they can do or more creative ways to use AppScript. And then on the other side, you have all of the products that you can connect through AppScript. And so a lot of times we have to rely on those separate product teams, such as the Gmail team or the Drive team, to be our subject matter experts there to give us the information about the functionality and translate it into the world of AppScript, because there's nobody on the AppScript team that knows every single service.
Yeah, you mentioned a really great point. I'd love to get your perspective on this. You know, workspace development is unique in development because it does take on multiple audiences, right? I mean, when you think of traditional development, it's more of a, you know, I'm a developer looking to be a developer. But with things like AppScript and even other parts of workspace development, there could be folks that don't even identify as developer, don't identify as technical, but they're there to get something done and learn from your content. How does that change your perspective of writing for such a broader audience awareness, skill, and frankly, even identification level? Does it affect the way the verse, the way you write, the way you think? I mean, how do you approach that?
Yeah, we try to find a good balance between writing in simple, clear ways, but also we're dealing with technical information. So, you know, Nathan had touched on this as an intro where, you know, our task is to explain very complicated subjects in easy to understand ways. And that's especially true for AppScript because we have an audience that ranges from citizen devs who are, you know, beginner to intermediate coders who I would consider myself a citizen dev because I don't identify as a developer, but I love AppScript. I love using it and understanding what I can do. And then, you know, we've got you guys who are pro developers who are also using AppScript. And so a happy medium for us is, you know, using as much plain language as we can. And, you know, for AppScript, a lot of times I try to explain things that are in a way that might be simple, but most people benefit from simple explanations versus, you know, if I was only writing for professional developers, then I'd be losing the audience that doesn't understand the more complicated words.
And also, I'm sorry. Yeah. Just going to jump in here. When I think about people learning more material, there's different learning types. Some are visual, some are hands-on. Do you think about that when you write stuff of your audience, where it fits? Like I can see where code samples would represent, I'm more of a hands-on person, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. I don't know if Nathan, I feel like I've been talking.
Yeah, Kara, I think we're both trying to jump in there.
Well, before you do, I'd love to pile on top of that question because you're right. Technical writing good documentation is just not documents, right? There's all different form factors as Steve was dressing up. And so you're right. How do you balance what's right, what, where, when, and also what's it like to write those other type of resources? I mean, it's definitely a broader than just, hey, here's an explanation, send out a doc.
Yeah. I mean, I could, all right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, and then I'll piggyback on whatever you're going to say.
Yeah, we try to use a mix of learning methods. So beyond just our bread and butter, which is our guides and our reference documentation, we'll also include things like code labs, which if you're not familiar with a code lab, it is kind of a walkthrough of a concept along with tangible code samples. So it's this hybrid of being able to conceptualize something and then show the proof of concept at the same time. We also employ quick starts, which will give you a really quick understanding of how something should work so that you can build on it for your own use case. And then, of course, code samples. I mean, it is the most in-demand thing, right? Samples everywhere. And to your point about writing for more low-code audiences, something I'm trying to do in the AppScript documentation is provide more context than maybe I otherwise would with code samples in more sophisticated API documentation. For example, when I started writing AppScript, I was looking at manifests and learning what a manifest does and what I needed. And I noticed that some of the samples would be like, a sliver of a manifest. But I was so new to this. I was like, but where do I put it? How does this fit in a larger file? Like, I just needed more context. So now when I approach my own writing and I think about the little sample we need, I have to also think about the context that should be there too, to give a better understanding of the whole picture.
Does coming to a product fresh help you in terms of your technical writing, because you're kind of almost in the position of the developer trying to understand something?
For me, it's been very helpful. I don't have that cursive information where I already know, so I assume other people know. And I'm trying to hold on to that as long as I can, because I'm constantly learning, and I have to hold on to those roots of being super new to a product.
Yeah, and I know as we think about scaling the team, and Charles, you asked earlier, kind of how do I think about covering all the bases? I mean, that's actually an aspect I think about, is trying to let people sink their roots into a product, but also cross-pollinate and sometimes move between products, so we get that fresh perspective. Because we all end up with blind spots as we create any sort of product or any sort of solution. And Steve, I want to go back to your point, because I really like kind of how you're thinking about that with different learning styles. That's something sometimes people think of documentation as just kind of like the how-to guide, the 1, 2, 3 step process. But something that has really changed over the years is kind of that form of documentation and kind of what's involved. And where 20 years ago, you're Ben Forda writing your 500-page book about a certain language or a certain kind of aspect of programming, and people buy that, or they get it from the library and they go through it kind of cover to cover, or they look through a table of contents. Now we have to think about this whole new medium where people drop into our documentation from Google search or from any search engine, and any page can be the first page. And there's kind of a whole new aspect to the way people consume information. I mean, in an age of Twitter and all these other things, people kind of they expect to be able to just get an answer. You think of your Google Assistant or Siri or whatever at home, you ask a question, you don't expect to get a dissertation about the background and everything. They just tell you the answer. So that's something we have to think about, is not just guiding people through the product, but also their journey through our documentation. And that I think it's things we're going to touch on a little later.
Right. I always wonder if, like, when there's a developer somewhere looking for something, they can't find it. If you kind of feel that, you kind of like, oh man, kind of like that vibe comes in someone's looking. But that said,
sometimes
you have a huge fan club. We've had a couple folks chime in. Anil said much love for the great docs. So you have a great fan club. Anil. And then also Mozart, many time caller, has a great question for you. Which has been the most challenging project thing in writing documentation? Either one of you want to handle that question from Mozart?
Yeah, I can take a stab at the Kara. I'd be really interested to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah,
and this kind of goes back to something that was just mentioned, is the breadth of Google Workspace. I mean, one of the most challenging things we've been working through recently, and we're still working through it, is how to connect the dots in a way that's intuitive and helpful to people. So, the Google Workspace kind of platform has developed over the last really 20 some years. And you think of when kind of Gmail started and all that stuff. I mean, there was kind of a Gmail API from very early on, or Drive API, and these kind of grew up, and some of them are older than others, but they grew up separately. And so, last year with the rebranding of Google Workspace and really thinking of this as a cohesive platform, something that we want people to develop within as an ecosystem, it's been an exciting new chapter for us, but also a big challenge, is how do we connect this big thing together in a way that's accessible to everyone? AppScript obviously being a big part of that. And then from our kind of more professional developer scheme of these different REST APIs and authorization, and how do we guide people through that process? That's been a big challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big challenge. You just mentioned something to me, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but I would imagine the last thing you folks want to hear is, hey, we're going to rebrand the product again.
You're trying to trigger us?
Documentation people.
Let's see, that's another thought came to mind. When you have team members doing documentation and some material I can see crosses over, how do you prevent duplication, or do you want some duplication in different pages? How do you manage all that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and I don't know if Nathan, you want to touch on this as well, but there are certain times where we do want information in a couple places, because as Nathan had mentioned, people are coming to our documentation from every different angle. So we want to make sure that the information is available from wherever the entry point is. And there's, especially with AppScript, there can be some crossover information, like when we're talking about add-ons, now that you can build in any runtime, there will be a lot of cross-product publication. But, you know, that does present a risk of, if you've put information in two places, you want to make sure it's updated at the same time, because then you run the risk of having conflicting information. I ran into this when I was working on the Google Workspace Marketplace publishing information, and we had publishing information across the AppScript documentation, add-ons documentation, chat, basically every type of item you could put in the marketplace. There was some sort of information about publishing in there. So what we can do with our tech stack for our content management system is actually cross-publish files, so that every time we update it, it updates across each site versus having to go in and update 3 different files. So we try to rely on that to reduce, out-of-date information. But duplication itself isn't all bad. It's just making sure you do it in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, so
yeah, and that's
these are a couple of great topics. I think again, anybody who's not familiar with your craft, and maybe it's just a user of your craft, may not think about all the effort that goes into this. But one of the most important things I see is the way you organize the information, right? So if I go in that left-hand nav, I can find things predictably that I would expect to be there. I actually can sort in a way, at least for me, it feels very natural. You're answering questions before I'm even asking it. How do you curate the content so it is discoverable in the right way, so people do find that journey, whether they're landing at the home page or, like you said, they come in the middle page somewhere, they get back to it? I've known you've reworked that a few times and you're always refining it, but how do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, Kara, real quick, and then I really want to hear what you're going to say. I was going to say, actually, this aspect of sharing content is kind of the hidden part of information architecture. So it's kind of the tip of the iceberg above the surface, where you think of the navigation and titles and headings and things like that. But getting the right granularity of where to share content, and so it's not too onerous for writers. Speaking of rebrands, I mean, we could use includes and snippets for every time we say Google and every time we say Workspace, just in case the name changes. Then that becomes very difficult to write, right? Or if you have something too big, then you need to customize it in some circumstances, and then that gets onerous. So yeah, there's an aspect of the sharing that's also part of this information architecture. But at a broad scale, and then I think Kara can go into probably more details of how it really plays out. I mean, we use Search Console and other things to understand what people are searching for, and where's the traffic, where are the eyeballs. So we're using Google Analytics and kind of that kind of suite of metrics that I think many people here listening in are probably familiar with. But for our documentation set, we've got nearly 4 to 5 million page views every month, from over 500,000 people around the world. And so it's not an easy task. It's not that everyone's searching for one thing. And so that does become an issue. But Kara might even talk about some of the content usability stuff. A lot of times getting people close to where they want to be, and making sure that the navigation around the breadcrumbs at the top of the page, the headings on the page, so the content's scannable, they can look down a big page and be able to see the section they're looking for, are big parts of that information architecture. But Kara, if you have more color.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I definitely wanted to touch on, like, we try to keep that consistency across our various sites. So if you go to AppScript or add-ons or Drive or Gmail documentation, you'll see very familiar sections. You'll have your guides, you'll have your reference, samples, support. All of that will be very familiar. So as you move through the Workspace sites, you get more comfortable as to where to look for things. When it comes to product-specific information architecture, that's where we can really dig in and do some testing. And I actually just did a lot of testing and research on the AppScript IA. When I say IA, I mean information architecture, just for those who
little tech writers speak there
Google
for you.
Yeah. But yeah, we did a huge study. It's actually quite a process. Like Nathan said, we look at Search Console. What are people searching for, and where are those searches landing them? Is it the right page? Does that page have the information they're looking for? We look at Google Analytics to see what the most popular pages are. And then we also, for me, I was talking to product to make sure I understood what the critical user journeys are for the product and how documentation supports that, who the target audiences are meant to be, and making sure our documentation aligns with that. And so you just have to ask a lot of different questions in a lot of different areas. A huge thing is user feedback, pouring through comments in the various channels that we use. And by synthesizing all that information, we can find the gaps and really ideate new ways to test our table of contents. And so recently I did all of this, and I performed tree tests, which, for anyone who's not familiar, it's a unmoderated study where someone, and if anyone's been to the AppScript documentation site in the past few months, you've probably seen banners of me begging you to do these tree tests. But basically, you are given a set of tasks and asked, okay, where would you find information about X? Like, let's say, where would you find information about building a Google Workspace add-on card? And then you look at your category choices and you decide, okay, this is where I would think to click first. And you kind of understand whether or not the way you've organized your information is working for people who are trying to find it. And I'm very excited because the results that we had for the new table of contents were incredible. For example, our reference section, the new table of contents that I will be launching later today, saw a 270% increase in findability. So I'm very excited to get that live for all users. Yeah, this was huge.
Let me get my ticker right.
Yeah. Breaking news.
So just online that some new documentation coming out after the show.
So I was just going to say there are a couple questions coming in, but before we go to that, I just thought of something. I remember at one time the decision was to have some release notes or snippets of that on the homepage. Was Google Analytics part of that to decide to remove that and just keep it onto another page?
Yeah. So that decision, I actually made that decision as one of my first changes when I became a tech writer on AppScript. And it was more about crowding the landing page. And, when you think about a landing page, my estimation is that most people that come to the landing page are new users. And so I wanted them to have a simpler jumping off point, a little more prescriptive. What is AppScript? Why would I use it? And what are the things I can do with it? So I don't think the link is there now in the current homepage, but another Totally Unscripted exclusive, we are launching a new landing page for the AppScript documentation today.
2 thumbs now, 2 thumbs.
Where I have a link to the release notes. So if you do land on that page as someone who's an AppScript user looking for the latest thing, you'll have quick access to the release notes as well.
In fact, doesn't the homepage at the bottom right-hand corner, snucked away, have Totally Unscripted there?
It does now, yes.
It does on the new one. So first of all, thank you for allowing us to have that shameless plug. One of the questions I wanted to ask in follow-up is, first of all, I love the fact that you're ever-changing, ever-improving, and you're trying to use analytics and data to make it better for us based upon how you see people using it. I also love the fact that you're writing documentation, but it's really bi-directional, right? You're actually getting, indirectly feedback from people on what they click on, what they're looking for, right? We're capturing all those analytics. You're synthesizing that data, but also you actively take feedback. And we know we see thumbs up, thumbs down on a page. We know we see add your, send your feedback here. What would you suggest, besides just hitting the thumbs up all the time, what would you suggest people do when they actually want to give that feedback to you? Like, what's constructive feedback that's helpful versus, well, I didn't find the feature I want, you guys aren't good. How do you actually, like, what are some of the good inputs that people could do to continuously to help improve it? Because it is for all of us.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, it goes back to what, again, we were talking about just scaling, is that's a big signal in our prioritization is where are people sending feedback about pages. So, for anyone viewing, just putting in that plug and highly encouraging people to send feedback, smash the thumbs up button, and, you can tap the thumbs down if you need to. No, but the thumbs down, it really is helpful for us. We look at all of those. We get a lot of feedback. And so we have some machine learning and some automation tools just kind of on Google's side, because we use kind of the standard Google feedback system there that can raise themes to us. But a lot of times, that will be a signal to us to focus on a topic or a whole doc set if we really see a lot of ratings coming in, and particularly if there's a lot of thumbs down. And, adding those comments is really invaluable for us. And we read them. And the most helpful comments are ones, as you mentioned, Charles, ones that aren't super vague and just like, hey, this product is useless. But something that says, hey, I came to this page looking for XYZ and I couldn't find it. Or I found part of the answer, but I was really looking for kind of the next level deeper. That is the kind of feedback that we can really act on. Of course, if there's typos, tell us about that too. But, it's most useful if it's, hey, I came to this page expecting X and it didn't fit that expectation. And that's really useful to us. I did want to mention too. Oh, I just want to mention too, as a plug, for anybody watching this, I've actually set up a special automation that if you tell us in your feedback comment, you put hashtag Totally Unscripted, or you say, I was watching Totally Unscripted and I wanted to give you this feedback, that kind of gets fast tracked to our team. We can't respond to the feedback, but we will read it and we will see it. So include hashtag Totally Unscripted in your feed.
How would you like some live feedback?
I would.
That's got some coming in here. So Amit Agarwal, who is very well known and has a great site with documentation on it himself, has a couple of things. First of all, he says, great conversation. I wish there was an integrated playground that would let us try snippets on the docs on the site itself. That's awesome feedback. That'll probably be by next week. We'll have that. Great.
Take care of that here by the end of this call.
Following up, Amit's got another point also worth sharing. Please add changelog as well, maybe an RSS feed. So some suggestions. So great. We got
even a Google chatbot. The Gam tool has a Google chat room with an automated bot.
Oh, awesome.
It's got Wes's bot in there, so I would sign up for that chat room.
Yeah,
that's a really good idea. I mean, we're always looking for ways to make our docs more interactive. I mean, that's another kind of expectation that readers have that, they maybe didn't have, 5-10 years ago, is they really want to be able to interact. And I think we've all used solutions like JS Bin or other things like that, where you just get that quick feedback loop of, okay, this works. Or if I tweak it this way, it doesn't work now. And so we are looking into those kinds of solutions for AppScript. For our REST APIs, we do have the Try This API called API Explorer on the right-hand side of reference docs. And if you haven't tried that for our REST APIs, I recommend giving it a try. That's been something that I use a ton to kind of play around with our APIs without setting up a whole environment. That's fantastic suggestion.
Some more feedback there for you. I'm sorry, I have to put that up.
Oh, fantastic! Thanks, Albert.
Nice.
You have a super huge fan club out there. I always hear from folks that the docs are great. So again, thank you on behalf of everybody, including ourselves here. We super appreciate your work. Let me ask you this though. Also, a lot of times you get maybe criticism, which is not necessarily appropriate. A lot of folks want more, right? The great thing is there's a lot of resources out there that actually extend on what you build, right? Whether it's answering questions, it's community, it's creating more verbose samples? What are some of the, if folks can't find it on your site and give you feedback, what are the other places that you would point folks to? What are some of the other great kind of partnerships or community features that you guys see that actually are helpful?
Yeah, I am incredibly grateful for the Google developer experts that we have with us today and in our larger group. There's some great content coming from you guys because, I think I touched on this before, AppScript documentation, we can't cover everything. And so when there are specific questions or niche use cases, it's really helpful to have a network of people who are passionate and writing about AppScript. And then when it comes to specific questions, I use Stack Overflow all the time for my specific questions on a method that just can't be covered in documentation because it's too specific for my need. But someone else probably ran into it as well. So Stack Overflow and the GDE community for me are my main go-tos. And I want to thank you guys for everything that you do because it's so helpful to have that extended network of support. I actually, one of the first pieces of content I looked at from the GDE group was Alice's presentation. She did a training for her fellow teachers. And the educators are a great audience to learn AppScript because they're not coders, but AppScript is approachable enough for them. And I remember one of Alice's points was saying, what the method does is written in the method name, and that felt good to know that it's pretty understandable for someone as long as you know what you're trying to do. It's pretty easy to find. And I thought she did a great job of just breaking it down simply and specifically for teachers, which is great.
Yeah.
Small point I'd like to add as well. So it's a tiny thing, but for me, it made a huge difference that the developer documentation is Creative Commons licensed. And for people not familiar what that means, it means as someone who does kind of tech writing on a blog, it means I can copy and paste code snippets, information from your site. And as long as I reference it as being from Google, I can do that without having to ask permission. And that's actually helped me in a number of tutorials I was writing. It's like there was already good documentation for, steps 1 to 2. There was something in 3 where I wanted to fork off and do something different, and I could do that a lot quicker. So that's a thank you for me for just considering that tiny little aspect, but it made a huge difference for me.
Oh, look at us, mutual appreciation.
I think it's a great segue to another topic I'd like to ask. So, as Martin pointed out, most engineers have to write documentation at some point, and they can't just borrow everything from everybody else. One of my favorite quotes I found actually up on a Google site is every engineer is also a writer. And Martin, if you wouldn't mind flashing, we've got a whole topic that Google actually prepares on how to be a tech writer, how to be a better tech writer. If you'd share that link, there's actually a site out there, developers.google.com/techwriting. Just see that. What advice would you give to us to write better documentation? I don't mean just pros outside of code. What are best practices for making better source code or commenting in source code? And I know there's some structures and some things, but obviously I remember back in like grammar books, they would say good sentence, bad sentence. I've seen some comments inside of people's documentation code where I'm like, I don't even know what you think you might be doing, maybe kind of. What are some of the tips you would have to help developers become better authors on their own content? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Kara mentioned earlier is kind of that curse of knowledge or curse of information. And, this is something that I think particularly affects developers who are writing code comments, because when you're writing the code, you're so familiar with how it works that it just feels pretty obvious. And so, one of the first things is to get someone who doesn't know your code to read your comments. The class example is to have your mom read them. Well, it doesn't need to be your mom, but a fellow developer, someone that you think kind of has that adequate baseline knowledge to understand, but can come in cold and try to understand what your code is doing. And, some ways you can set yourself up for success in that is using plain, kind of clear language. It's one of the things that we talk about, as a writing team, sometimes, and especially as developers, we're tempted to want to appear intelligent and smart. And so we want to use big words, or we want to, write it in a way that it conveys the complexity of what we built. It was hard, and we want people to know it was tough. But the real effectiveness comes in when you actually make it seem easy. You conceal that complexity through very plain language. And I remember one of my first English classes in college, I wanted to look really smart, and my professor just wrote in big letters on my paper, eschew obfuscation. And that has stuck with me, to just say it in plain language. That's one of the major principles.
Yeah. Kara.
Yeah, I would add, to add on to that, focusing on the user's goal and not like your product features. Ask yourself, if someone's only going to read the first sentence of my comments, what do they absolutely need to know? Front loading all the most important information and just making it scannable. You want to make sure that, someone who's quickly looking for an answer is going to be able to find it almost immediately. Like Nathan said, plain language. What else do we go with? Conversational tone is something that we strive for here at Google. I've been changing a lot of, in my own personal writing, I've been changing a lot of words like obtain to get. So it's just like quicker, easier.
I remember a course that was offered by one of the tech writers at the GDE Summit a couple of years back when we got together in person. I remember walking in, and the very first thing this technical writer was putting on the board, they put a long sentence on the board and they showed you how to shorten the sentence. Mm-hmm. And the number one thing they were stressing is say less to say more. And it's so important to figure out how to make it shorter, because again, people aren't going to read the whole thing or get lost by it. But it's so powerful to learn how to convey the same message with less words. And I'm really bad at that, as you can tell, I'm still talking. But it's just like, how do you do that? And that's a great thing. And one of the things I love, first of all, writers sharing with writers, again, it's an art and a science, is you're constantly crafting your trade and making better at it. For example, I love, I don't know if they still do these, but they had Burning Pen internally, where tech writers would get together at Google and learn how to tech write from each other and everything. So it's a craft you have to keep honing and keep practicing. It's just not automatic, and how you get it right. And so again, it's an art and a science at the same time.
I've done the technical writing course and offered by Google. I've just shared in the chat. They do offer dates where you can do it online, and it's a really good. I found it really informative, and the aspects you're talking about just how you're structuring sentences, active and passive and things like that, and just really thinking about it at a fundamental level of just what you're trying to convey, and little things like using lists, which I'd never really considered before. And
love lists.
Like, oh yeah, lists.
Yeah, there's so many things to think about. I know for myself, I still will take refresher courses. We offer internal writing classes here at Google. And even when it's stuff I know I've been taught before, I enjoy taking the class again, because I want to make sure it's fresh and top of mind, because there's too many things swimming around your mind when you're writing that a refresher never hurts.
Yeah.
One of my best practices, and I don't always follow it, but I try, is when you're writing code, and you're writing code also, especially if it's to be a code sample, document it while you're writing it, because A, when you go back, you may not go back and leave it uncommented, and then B, you may not have the freshness of mind to explain it the same way. And so I've tried to make it best practices as you write the code. Again, you don't always do that, but try to actually document it while you do it. It may sound little, but I've seen many undocumented lines of code, or the person has to come back and rethink what they even did to figure out how to explain it. So I don't know if it's a good practice, but there's
that kind of hits on something that, kind of in summary of kind of a lot of things that have been said here. The way that I like to think about kind of assessing documentation is really kind of through three lenses. And I think the first one is the most obvious one that most people think about, and that's accuracy. In that is what I've written accurately reflective of what I'm describing? But I think there's two other lenses that fly under the radar, but are just as important. And the second would be the quality of the writing. So that's kind of the writing mechanics. That's using plain language. That's using some of these best practices. And the third one is effectiveness. And so this is where it's like, is your writing or your code comments, or is your article overview, page description of your code or of your product, is it effectively helping people do the ultimate goal, the ultimate journey? And so that's something that we really focus on. And documentation has turned into kind of a UX exercise, a user experience exercise, where we are kind of designing pages not just in the words that are used, but actually in how it looks, how it feels, what that experience is. So we talk about interactivity. I see a comment here about screenshots and whether we use those or whether we don't. Thank you, Anil, for that question. I mean, there are aspects where if it's a very kind of complicated user interface that we're trying to describe, a screenshot can be extremely useful. And we've done a lot of experimentation now with animated GIFs and with videos and those kind of visuals. Those can be extremely useful. Overuse of them can become confusing because now there's just a bunch of images on the page and you kind of have to decide, wait, which one's step one and which one's step two? And my UI looks a little different. I have a different language. So we try to use them sparingly. But again, that kind of comes down to this effectiveness, usability aspect of documentation that is sometimes neglected and can be the difference between poor docs and great docs.
Well, kind of related to Anil's question about, I was just thinking, about use of screenshots. Workspace, like Google's products, it's a global product. How does translation work? Do you have teams around the globe? Do you rely on auto-translate or not? None of the above?
Yeah, we have a large team of translators actually used kind of across Google, and it can work in a couple different ways. So we have for a lot of our like admin help center content that's translated into a whole list of languages. And that is much of it human translation. Some of it's assisted by machine translation now. So we're trying to utilize that again to just be able to scale efforts. For our developer documentation, we right now really provide it just in English. And we're experimenting with some machine translation, which has really improved over the last few years, to be able to provide our developer documentation at scale to people all around the world. Like I said, we've got over 500,000 people from all around the world using our documentation. So we know there's a need, but yeah, it's a difficult proposition for the text. And then screenshots and videos are very difficult to translate. But we have some tricks up our sleeve, like captions for videos, things like that. Kara, I don't know if you have also a lot of experience with this. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I was actually just going to touch on translation when it comes to best practices for writing. If there are any developers out there who are going to translate their documentation into other languages, you want to keep in mind that whoever's localizing your content, the best practice for you is to write as simply as you can, because you're sending it to someone to have them make sense in another language for you. And so you want to make sure that your writing is easily translatable for someone else. And that's another thing that we would think about when I was doing end user content. We would avoid, words that end in ing because it could be confusing, or, we say might instead of may because may can mean two different things in English, where it becomes hard to translate because are you saying you're allowed to do this or you can do this? And so when you add translation into the mix, there's a whole another section of style requirements you have to think about.
It should and must is the one. You should fill in your expenses. Yeah. You must fill in your expenses.
Yeah.
We had a question. I think.
Sorry, I was talking through the mic there a second. I was just. I had a document writing joke. I was going to say, if I ever joined your team, would you actually have someone translate my content into English? Because it would probably be helpful. But speaking of trends of document writing jokes, I was just teasing when I was chatting with you folks yesterday. If how does feedback to the employees go if I hit the up arrow more than the down arrow? If I like the content or like the content, and how many down hours before you call someone like Kara into your office and say, "Hey, we got to fix this content"? So, but are there any good tech writing jokes you can share with us?
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I've got a lot of dad puns, but I don't know about tech writing jokes. So.
No, that's awesome. That's good. No, but it's good to have a sense of humor. Anyway, we're getting close to time. This is super awesome content and conversation. Like I said, not just a user, but a big fan. But also curious, is there any other insights or not trade secrets, but secrets you can share with us on how you arrive at where you're at? What are some of the processes, or maybe even what are some of the things you're working for in the future? Is there anything else you can enlighten us in the few minutes left on either how you do what you do, or how are you taking us where we're going to go in the future? Either question is fine.
We want to see the new stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to? Okay, let's do that. Let's do the exclusive. Carol, you want to show us the exclusive side by side, the before and after?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, even better.
All right. So what we're looking at now, hopefully some of you are familiar with this page. This is the current landing page for AppScript. Just to point out a few things that we were thinking about when we updated this page. Just coming to this page, there's a lot of things that you could potentially click on. There's actually a few links on here that will take you to different websites. And so as you go through this page as a new user, there's a lot of text, there's a lot of links, very heavy on the add-on push down here. So if you're not just looking for Totally Unscripted, it can be a very daunting first experience with AppScript. And so what we're launching today, let me make sure I can get this open. All right. Can everybody see the screen now?
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're launching today is a cleaner, simpler approach to the AppScript landing page. And what we've done is we've brought in the add-ons experience and the API experience to one cohesive website. And you'll still have all of your favorite AppScript programming as well. Just a simple definition of what it is. We wanted to visually show, the types of connections that you can make across Workspace. And then, as I mentioned before, we're trying to get more prescriptive with new users, introducing them to project types. So we listed a few here that you can click into and learn more about. And as promised, the release notes button is down here on the left. So I'm very excited for this to go live. I think it will be very helpful for new people. And, I love change personally, so I'm very excited for a new look.
And when will this go live, you think?
Shortly after this show, really.
Woo-hoo,
I want
breaking news.
Give your viewers, the first preview, and then we're going to show it to everybody.
I love it simplified. I love it streamlined. I love the new look. I did notice the Totally Unscripted logo is gone, but okay.
It's still there. It's just on the bottom.
Oh, you go all the way down to the bottom. Okay. No. You didn't scroll far enough. Yeah. Shameless replug. But no, I think it's awesome. I think you're so right. I mean, helping people focus and jump off better. I do remember, many iterations past where it was, all the different changes in the product. And like you said, the average new person was like, so you're telling me historical things. I don't know what this present does for me. So
it's a small thing, but I love in the top nav bar, it's learn, build, and use.
Yeah.
I think that for AppScript, people coming to AppScript as a product, I think that's such a positive word to have before it. I guess it's these small things that can make a big difference in terms of the experience a user has.
Noticed that because I poured over that for hours. Oh boy, yeah. I'm going to
uptick that one.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, a lot of love and a lot of listening, went into that redesign from Kara. I mean, she really ran multiple user research studies. I mean, some of the people on this, watching this live stream might have been part of those studies that she mentioned, and read a lot of comments and interviewed a lot of people building the product, people using the product. And so, there's a lot that goes into that, but it manifests itself in those little things, and that is really true. And one of the unique challenges of developer documentation is that we're not always, we're very rarely describing discrete tasks that people do. Click here, click there, and then voila, you got your solution. We're trying to, just give people a sense of the possibilities, because by definition, a developer platform is for you to build new things that we're not even thinking of, that we've never imagined. And that's ultimately what we want to propel with our documentation. And so this hopefully is what, this new structure will help people to kind of get a sense for the framework they have to work in. What are the possibilities? And then, we're excited to see what comes out of it.
That's awesome. That's an awesome way to explain it. Cool. Well, we are almost at time. And again, just on behalf of everybody, first of all, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your work. Thanks for the redesign. I know we asked for future thinking things. I don't want to sound greedy or selfish. We'll have you back on the next episode to talk about those. But, just again, thanks so much for your efforts and everything. And, appreciate your work.
Yeah, I hope you feel the love as well. There's been a lot of love. I think we all appreciate the time and effort that you put into the documentation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for having us on, and especially for all the feedback that you do provide as GDEs. It's invaluable to us, and please never stop. Really
Excellent. Good. Well, Charles, next week
next week we have another. First of all, next week is Next. So Google Cloud Next, which runs during the middle of next week, online virtual event. There's a bunch of announcements coming out, not just new documentation things, but some new things around Workspace. We just put up a blog, so if you want to check out the kind of must-see developer episodes, Martin's got the banner up on the screen, so do check those out. An abundance, actually, of developer-based topics, including some keynote content that will show some new and exciting things that you have never seen before. Our show next week, in correspondence with Next, will be rallied around one of the launch announcements. That launch announcement is for a brand new API being announced for one of our really familiar, comfortable friends in the Google Workspace family of applications. And so joining us will be Christian Schock. And Christian's been working with the product team to release this. And so it'll be announced at Next, but we're going to do a deep dive here to give you a deeper first look. So do tune in for that same time next Wednesday, and look forward to it.
And following, slightly different day, but the following show after that, we've hopefully got
the following show after that is going to be a unique one. We're going to bring back, I don't even know how to refer to him. He was kind of one of the, not a founding father, but definitely one of the legends of AppScript. Eric Kalita is going to join us and talk about life after AppScript and what he's working on, how he still uses it, how he's learning or how he's applying what he learned and uses here. And also, even though he's technically left Google, he's still out there in the community answering questions, and I don't understand why, but he hasn't forgot us, and so he's going to come back and talk to us, and so I'm excited for that one. That'll be the Tuesday, the week following, because we have a little personal conflict for some of the hosts, but look forward to that show as well too. So join us, look forward to it.
Stay tuned. So thanks everyone for contributing in the chat as well, and remember, if you're on the Workspace documentation page, hashtag Totally Unscripted, you'll get the documentation eyes on that one. So keep sending the love and feedback to them as well. And thank you, Cara and Nathan, for coming on the show. It's been
thank you.
Fantastic just to discover what's behind the curtain.
Thanks for having us. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Great.
So until next time, folks, happy scripting, and we'll hopefully see you next week.